I thought this family trip would finally heal the cracks between us. My parents promised it would be unforgettable. My little boy packed his tiny backpack, eyes sparkling as he whispered, "Mom, I can't wait to fly on a plane for the first time." But at the airport, the truth hit like a slap. My parents handed my sister and her family first-class plane tickets, then turned to me with a smirk. "You and your son can take the bus. 12 hours, that suits you better." As they waved goodbye, I held my child's hand tighter. Do you think I will just silently endure or do something else? I folded my son's tiny shirts one by one, pressing them neatly into the suitcase as he danced around the room with uncontainable excitement. "Mom, do you think they'll give us ice cream on the plane? Do you think I can see the clouds up close?" His little hands held his toy airplane high, circling it through the air. I smiled, watching him jump on the bed like he was already flying. For weeks, this trip had been the talk of our household. My parents had insisted on organizing a grand family vacation, something to bring us all closer together. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to think that, for once, they'd see me not as the disappointing daughter who couldn't hold her marriage together, but simply as their child. I thought, foolishly perhaps, that maybe this was their way of healing old wounds. I zipped the suitcase shut and crouched down to my son's level. "Yes, baby," I said, brushing his hair from his forehead. "You'll see the clouds. You'll feel like you're on top of the world." His eyes widened and he hugged me tightly. That hug gave me strength, a kind of fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this trip would be different. If it were you, hearing your child so eager, wouldn't your heart soften too? The next morning, I dressed him in his little striped sweater and took a deep breath. We arrived at the airport, my heart racing with anticipation. My parents were already there, standing proudly beside my older sister and her husband. They had brand new luggage, designer clothes, and my niece holding a tiny pink suitcase that sparkled under the fluorescent lights. "Finally, you made it," my sister said, glancing at me like she was doing me a favor just by acknowledging my presence. My father reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "Here are the tickets," he said, handing one to my sister, one to her husband, and even a separate one for their daughter. My heart swelled, waiting for mine. But then my mother turned to me, her lips curled, into something between a smirk and a sneer. She didn't hand me a plane ticket. Instead, she held out a folded slip of paper. "Here," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. I unfolded it, expecting the same glossy boarding pass my sister had just received. But it wasn't. It was a bus ticket. A one-way bus ticket. I blinked, confused. "Mom, what is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. She let out a short laugh. "Did you really think you'd be flying business class with us? Don't be ridiculous." My face flushed hot. My son tugged at my sleeve, his little brow furrowed. "Mom, where's our plane ticket? Don't we get to sit in the sky too?" Before I could answer, my sister leaned closer, her perfume suffocating. "Oh, come on," she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "A filthy bus suits you and your kid better. First class is for people who actually made something of their lives." Her daughter, not even 10 years old, wrinkled her nose. "Yeah, Mom, buses stink. I don't want to ride with them." The words landed like knives. Around us, other travelers turned their heads. Some frowned in disapproval, others smirked as if enjoying the drama. My son's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I crouched again, forcing a smile for him. "It's okay, sweetheart. The bus will be fun. We'll see so many things out the window." My voice cracked, but I held him close, hiding my humiliation. My sister flipped her hair and strutted toward the check-in counter, her heels clicking on the floor like a countdown to my despair. My parents followed her without another glance at me. For them, this was normal. For me, it was another scar. I felt like a child again, standing in the shadow of my sister, begging for approval that would never come. My chest ached, but I bit down on my lip, refusing to cry in front of them. If nothing else, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The bus ticket trembled in my hand. 12 hours. 12 hours of bumps, sweat, and exhaustion, while my family sipped champagne above the clouds. I could already imagine them, leaning back in plush seats, laughing about how poor little me rattled along the highway. I kissed the top of my son's head and straightened my shoulders. "Come on, love, let's go find our bus." He looked up at me with those trusting eyes, and I felt a surge of determination. Maybe we wouldn't have first-class seats, but I could still make this trip special for him. We walked toward the bus terminal, our small suitcase rolling noisily behind us. I turned once, just in time to see my parents waving from the glass wall of the departure lounge. My sister raised her hand too, a triumphant smirk plastered across her face, as if she had already won some invisible battle. I smiled faintly and waved back, hiding the storm in my chest. They thought they had humiliated me. They thought I would swallow the insult and quietly fade into the background, like always. I squeezed my son's hand tighter, holding my head high as we stepped onto the bus. The air inside was heavy with the smell of sweat and oil, and someone's radio played a sad old song. My boy wrinkled his nose, but climbed aboard bravely. I followed, silently promising myself that this would be the last time I allowed them to push us aside. I sat by the window, watching the airport lights blur in the distance. The laughter of my sister and her daughter echoed in my ears, but another sound soon broke through. A soft, kind voice beside me. "Is this seat taken?" an elderly woman asked, her wrinkled hands clutching a modest handbag. I looked up, startled, and gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself into the seat with a sigh, her eyes twinkling as they met mine. There was something about her, something calm, almost regal. I couldn't help but notice, she said gently, "You have such a polite little boy." I blinked, my heart still sore. "Thank you," I murmured. She smiled knowingly, as if she saw right through me. I forced another smile, but deep inside, a strange unease stirred. I hadn't realized it yet, but meeting this woman would change everything. Before I could understand what was going on, my sister threw me a sentence that made the whole airport turn to look. The paper ticket in my hand felt heavier than any suitcase I had ever carried. The more I stared at it, the more the black ink blurred into one cruel word: bus. My sister leaned closer, her voice sharp and cutting. "A filthy bus suits you and your boy more than a plane ever could. Don't you think so?" Her laughter was loud, theatrical, meant for everyone around us to hear. Her daughter, clutching her sequined bag, wrinkled her tiny nose and giggled. "Mom, buses stink. I'm glad we're not going with them." "Ew." My chest tightened. I wanted to shield my son from the poison of their words, but children are like sponges. He looked up at me, confusion clouding his big brown eyes. "Mommy, Why can't we sit in the sky too? Did I do something wrong? I felt something in me crack. My throat burned with unshed tears, but I forced a smile, cupping his little face. No, sweetheart, I whispered, praying my voice wouldn't tremble. You did nothing wrong. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Inside, though, I was screaming. I wanted to shout at my mother, to tell her how much her favoritism had cut me all these years. I wanted to tell my sister that no amount of designer handbags could make her better than us, but I didn't. I never did. Instead, I tightened my grip on my son's hand and walked toward the exit, my heart pounding with humiliation. Behind me, I could hear my family laughing, their voices carrying across the terminal like daggers thrown at my back. The bus station was a world apart from the glittering airport hall. The air smelled of diesel and fried food. People sat slumped on benches, some dozing, others shouting into their phones. My son clung to my coat, his excitement drained, replaced by a nervous silence. We boarded the bus. The seats were torn, the windows streaked with grime. The air was hot and heavy, filled with the scent of sweat, and something fried that had long since stopped smelling appetizing. I guided my son to a seat near the window, hoping the breeze might ease his discomfort. He curled up against me, his small head resting on my shoulder. Within minutes, his breathing slowed, exhaustion taking over. I brushed his hair gently, staring out at the blur of passing buildings. The bus engine roared as we pulled away, leaving the airport lights to fade into the distance, and that was when the memories came flooding back. I was 8 again, standing in the living room, clutching a drawing I had worked on for hours. My mother glanced at it briefly before setting it aside, her eyes already on my sister who was playing the piano. "Look at your sister," she said. "So talented, so graceful. Why can't you be more like her?" Another memory, my father handing my sister money for a school trip while telling me there wasn't enough for both of us. "You'll be fine at home. Help your mother with chores," he had said, as if my dreams were less important. All my life, I had been the shadow child, the one expected to endure in silence. And now, years later, here I was again, relegated to the bus while my sister soared above me in comfort. I clenched my jaw, blinking back tears. I couldn't let my son grow up believing he was less, just because his mother wasn't the favorite. A soft voice broke through my thoughts. "Is this seat taken?" I turned and saw her, the elderly woman from the terminal. She wore a plain cardigan and carried a small, worn leather handbag. Her silver hair was neatly tied back, her face lined with age but glowing with a quiet dignity. "No, please, sit," I said quickly, moving my bag to the floor. She settled into the seat with a sigh of relief. For a moment, we rode in silence, the bus rattling over potholes. Then she turned to me with a kind smile. "You have a very polite little boy. He helped me with my bag back there. Such good manners are rare these days." I felt warmth spread through me. "Thank you. He's all I have, so I try to raise him right." She studied me with eyes that seemed far too sharp for her age. "And you're doing it well. I could see how he looked at you at the station. With love. That's worth more than any airplane ticket." Her words caught me off guard. For the first time that day, my tears slipped free, not from humiliation, but from the sudden relief of being seen. I whispered, "It's hard, you know, when even your own family treats you like you don't belong." She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than I had said aloud. People often forget that kindness is the real luxury, not the seats, not the champagne, but how we treat those who trust us. I glanced at her, curious. There was something about her voice, calm and commanding, that made me wonder who she really was. Outside, the night stretched endlessly, the headlights cutting through the darkness. My son stirred, mumbling in his sleep, and I pulled the blanket tighter around him. The old woman reached out, gently patting my hand. "You remind me of someone I used to know, a girl who was pushed aside, but who found her way back, stronger than anyone expected." Her words lingered in the air. I opened my mouth to ask who she meant, but she only smiled mysteriously, looking out the window as if she saw something far beyond the dark road. My heart pounded again, but this time it wasn't from humiliation. It was something else, something I couldn't quite name. But I had no idea. The woman sitting next to me that day was... The bus screeched to a halt as dawn stretched its pale fingers across the horizon. My son stirred, rubbing his eyes, and the elderly woman beside us gave a patient smile. Despite the long hours, she looked surprisingly composed, her hair still neatly pinned, her eyes bright with something I couldn't quite read. "Come," she said softly, rising from her seat with a grace that belied her age. "You and the boy should come with me. It will be easier." I blinked, clutching our bag to my chest. "Oh no, we couldn't trouble you. We'll just take a taxi from here." Her laugh was light, like wind chimes. "Nonsense, you've already helped me. Let me return the kindness. Sometimes, my dear, when you do good, life brings good back to you in unexpected ways. You'll see." She extended her hand, and before I knew it, I was following her through the crowded station. My son held onto my other hand, his small legs stumbling to keep up, but his face lit up when she offered him a piece of candy from her purse. He beamed at her as if she were his grandmother, and she chuckled, ruffling his hair. We stepped outside into the cool morning air, where a sleek black car was waiting. The driver in a suit quickly opened the door. I froze, unsure if this was some kind of mistake. This is for you?" I asked, unable to hide my astonishment. "For us," she corrected gently. "Please, get in, I insist." The seats were soft leather, the air conditioning a blissful relief after the suffocating bus. My son sank into the cushions with a sigh of delight. I wanted to protest, but something in her calm demeanor silenced me. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't ordinary. The car glided through the city, past glittering billboards and bustling streets, until finally we pulled up to a towering glass hotel. My heart skipped. This was the very hotel where my parents had said we'd all be staying. I looked at her, confused. She smiled, almost mischievously. "I told you, child, sometimes kindness comes back." The driver opened her door first, bowing slightly as she stepped out. Guests and staff alike turned their heads, whispering, some even bowing their heads respectfully. The doorman rushed forward, greeting her with a reverence I had only ever seen when my father's business partners came around. I held my son's hand tighter, suddenly feeling out of place in my worn jeans and his faded sweater. But she didn't hesitate. She reached for my arm, linking hers with mine, and guided us straight through the grand marble lobby. And then, as if fate itself were staging a cruel play, I saw them. My parents and my sister stood in the lobby, fresh from their first-class flight. My sister's hair was perfectly styled, her designer luggage trailing behind her as if she were royalty. Her daughter tugged on her hand, chattering about how soft the plane seats were. They turned and froze. My mother's smile faltered, her eyes darting from me to the woman beside me. My father's lips parted in shock, as if he couldn't quite compute what he was seeing. And my sister, oh, my sister! Her smug expression cracked, her painted smile collapsing into disbelief, because the woman holding my arm, the woman they had so casually dismissed as an ordinary old passenger, was walking straight toward them. And everyone, staff, guests, even the manager, was bowing as she passed. "Madam Chairwoman," the hotel manager said breathlessly, rushing to greet her. "Welcome back. Your suite is ready." My heart skipped again. Chairwoman. I turned to look at her, my mouth suddenly dry. She winked at me as if sharing a private joke. The manager's eyes flickered to me and my son, then back to her. And these guests? Before I could stammer an explanation, the woman's hand tightened on mine. She lifted our joined hands slightly, her voice calm but carrying across the entire marble hall. "They are with me," she said. The silence that fell was deafening. My sister's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like a fish gasping for air. My mother's hand trembled as she clutched her designer scarf tighter around her shoulders. I felt dozens of eyes on us, strangers wondering why the powerful chairwoman of one of the country's largest travel corporations was personally escorting a tired single mother and her child into the most luxurious hotel in the city. My son looked around in awe. "Mommy, is this where the plane people go?" he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. I swallowed hard, unable to answer. I didn't understand it myself, but the elderly woman only leaned closer, her eyes glinting with something fierce yet kind. "From now on," she said, her words low but sharp enough to cut through the tension in the air, "you walk beside me, not behind anyone." I froze. My family's stunned silence pressed down on me like a weight, but in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt a spark of something new, something dangerously close to power. At that moment, she turned to me and said something that left the whole family speechless. The lobby went silent, as though the marble walls themselves were holding their breath. The elderly woman's words lingered in the air. "From now on, you walk beside me, not behind anyone." I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. My heart raced, my mother's mouth opened, then snapped shut. My father's hand tightened around his suitcase handle. My sister's painted smile collapsed into a grimace, her eyes darting between me and the woman who had just been addressed as Madam Chairwoman. The hotel manager bowed deeply again. "Yes, madam, we've prepared the presidential suite, as always." My mother finally found her voice. "President? Chairwoman? You?" She stammered, her tone a mix of awe and desperation. The old woman straightened, her presence towering though she was barely taller than me. "Yes, I am the chairwoman of Horizon Travel Group. I invited this family here as my guests, but I must correct a mistake." She turned, her sharp eyes locking onto my parents. The reward I offered was not for wealth nor for status. It was for kindness, for love. And yesterday, on that bus, it was your daughter and grandson who showed me what true dignity looks like. My sister's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, trying to protest. But, the woman raised her hand, silencing her. "You laughed at me. You mocked them. Yet when I needed help, not once did you extend a hand." She did. The woman squeezed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. She has more nobility in her heart than all the luxury seats in the world could buy. I stood frozen, my cheeks burning, but this time not from shame. From behind me, I felt my son's small fingers curl into mine. The chairwoman turned to the manager. "Please arrange for them to be upgraded to fly with me. Their comfort is my responsibility." Gasps rippled through the lobby. My sister's husband stammered, "Madam, we didn't know." "I know," the chairwoman cut him off, "and that is the problem." My mother's eyes were wide, pleading, but she didn't say a word. 2 hotel staff members appeared, politely taking our worn suitcase and leading us toward the elevators. I caught a glimpse of my sister's face, twisted with disbelief, her daughter tugging at her sleeve in confusion. For once, it was not me shrinking under their gaze. It was them watching me, silent, powerless, while I walked forward with my head high, my son's hand in mine, and the chairwoman beside me, like a guardian angel. Inside the limousine that took us to the airport again, my son whispered, "Mommy, are we going on the plane now?" I looked into his hopeful eyes and felt tears prick again, but this time they were different. I brushed his cheek with my thumb and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, we are, because you deserve it." His little face lit up brighter than the sunrise behind him. "I knew it," he squealed, bouncing on the seat. The chairwoman chuckled. "Such spirit," she said. "He reminds me of someone I once knew." At the airport, everything was different. No sneers, no dismissive glances. Instead, staff members greeted us with bows and respectful smiles. We were ushered through private check-in counters, our luggage taken care of without a word. Walking into the first-class lounge, I felt eyes following us. My parents were already seated, sipping champagne. Their expressions when they saw me again, this time stepping into their sacred space, were priceless. My sister nearly choked on her drink. What are you doing here?" she whispered harshly, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, the chairwoman entered, her presence silencing the room once more. She walked straight past them and placed her hand on my shoulder. "These 2," she announced clearly, "are my honored guests. They will sit with me." The color drained completely from my sister's face. My mother's eyes darted, desperate to understand, but there was no explanation that could undo the scene. We boarded the plane, and for the first time in my life, I stepped into the spacious world of business class. The leather seats stretched out like beds, attendants bowed, offering us warm towels and juice before we even sat down. My son climbed onto the seat and giggled, pressing the button that made it recline. "Mommy, the chair moves, it's like magic," he exclaimed, his laughter filling the cabin. I couldn't help but laugh with him. I watched his joy, his innocence, and felt my chest swell with pride. For him, this wasn't about status, it was about wonder. About finally being allowed to experience what others had told him he didn't deserve. I smoothed his hair and whispered softly, "Because you're worth it, my love. You are worth everything." For the first time, I believed it myself. From the corner of my eye, I saw my sister shuffle past with her family, heading toward the economy section. She shot me a glare, but her cheeks were still flushed. She looked so small, so fragile, stripped of the superiority she had always wielded like a weapon. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than any insult she could ever throw. The plane began to taxi down the runway, engines roaring. My son squealed again, pressing his nose to the window as the ground blurred. The chairwoman leaned back in her seat beside me, sipping tea, her eyes calm, almost knowing. I let out a slow breath. The weight on my chest was lifting. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was arriving. But even as the plane lifted off the ground, even as my son's delighted laughter filled the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end of the story. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. But little did I know, this was just the beginning. The hum of the airplane was steady, almost like a lullaby. My son had finally drifted off to sleep in the wide leather seat beside me, his little hand still clutching the candy wrapper the old woman had given him. I watched him for a moment, memorizing the calm on his face, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. For the first time in years, he looked truly at peace. Across from me, the chairwoman poured steaming tea into 2 delicate porcelain cups. The fragrance of jasmine filled the small space. She handed one to me with both hands, her gaze thoughtful. "You're a strong woman," she said softly. I blinked, caught off guard. "Strong?" I shook my head. "No, I just endure." She took a slow sip, then set her cup down. "Endurance is strength, child. Do not underestimate it. When others looked away yesterday, you didn't. You noticed me struggling with my bag, and your son, he offered me his seat without hesitation. Do you know how rare that is?" I lowered my eyes, embarrassed. "I only did what anyone should do." "Ah," she chuckled, "that is what I once thought too. But you will learn, as I did, that kindness, true kindness, is not common, especially from those who have suffered. Most hearts turn hard, yours didn't." Her words pierced me, deeper than any insult my family had thrown. I felt the sting of tears but tried to hide them, sipping my tea. "Many years ago," she continued, her gaze distant now, "I was the unwanted child. My parents adored my brother. He was the golden one. I was invisible. When I succeeded, they wanted to return. But by then, I had already learned the most important lesson. Family is not about blood. It is about those who stand by you when you are nothing." I looked up, startled. She nodded knowingly. "Yes, I heard everything your family said, every cruel word. It reminded me of my past." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, and my hands trembled around the teacup. This woman, this powerful figure, had walked the same road I had. She knew. "You have a light," she said suddenly. "And your boy, he shines even brighter because of it. I see potential in you, potential you don't even see in yourself." I blinked at her. Potential? Me? I don't even have a real job. I just survive. "That's where you're wrong," she interrupted firmly. "Survival is a skill. Resilience is rare. And people like you, people who know pain, are the ones who can build something truly meaningful. I have been watching you even before yesterday. I don't leave things to chance." Her words hit me like a wave. Watching me? Before yesterday? My mind spun. "I run one of the largest travel groups in the country," she explained. "But I don't just want to sell luxury. I want to build something that bridges the gap between worlds. Something that allows families like yours to experience joy without shame. Community-based travel, affordable yet dignified. And I believe you are the right person to lead such a project with me." I stared at her, stunned. "Me? Lead a project? But I don't." She raised her hand, silencing me with a calm authority. "I've seen enough. I've spoken to your son. I've watched the way you carried yourself under humiliation, and I know. You are not weak. You are exactly the kind of partner I need." My heart pounded so loudly, I was afraid it might wake my son. 1,000 doubts crashed into me. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the education my sister had. I didn't have the resources. What if I failed? As if sensing my turmoil, my son stirred awake, his sleepy eyes finding mine. "Mommy, are we really going to live here with the nice lady?" he asked, his voice filled with a fragile hope that pierced me to my core. I looked into his eyes so full of trust, so full of belief in me, and I felt something shift inside. I thought of all the years I had spent shrinking, all the times I had bitten my tongue to avoid conflict, all the times I had accepted less because I believed I didn't deserve more. But maybe I did. Maybe he did. I turned back to the chairwoman, my hands still trembling, but my voice steady. "I don't know what you see in me, but if you really believe I can do this, then I'll try. I'll do it." Her smile was radiant, a mix of pride and relief. She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "That's all I ask. Try, and I promise you, your life will never be the same." As the plane soared above the clouds, I gazed out of the window, the world below shrinking into a patchwork of green and gold. My son leaned against me, whispering, "We're flying, Mommy. We're really flying." I kissed the top of his head, my chest full to bursting. I had no idea what challenges lay ahead, no idea what sacrifices this new path would demand. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. Little did I know that the decision to nod that day would cause my whole life to take an unexpected turn. Months passed like chapters in a book I had never imagined myself living. What began as a humiliating bus ride turned into the seed of a new life. The chairwoman kept her promise. With her guidance, I became part of a project that sought to bring affordable travel experiences to families who had never once dreamed of leaving their hometowns. At first, I doubted every step. I sat in meetings surrounded by polished executives in their tailored suits, my hands trembling under the table as I tried to take notes fast enough to keep up. But the chairwoman never let me sink. When I faltered, she would place a reassuring hand on my shoulder and whisper, "You belong here. Speak your truth." Slowly, I did. I began sharing ideas drawn from my own struggles about how travel shouldn't be reserved for the rich, how every child deserves to see the world outside their window. To my surprise, people listened. They nodded, took notes, and asked me to elaborate. The first time one of my suggestions was implemented, I couldn't believe it. We partnered with small villages, creating cultural exchange programs that were affordable yet authentic. Families like mine could finally afford to travel, to stay in cozy homestays, to see mountains and oceans they had only read about. The project gained traction faster than anyone expected. Articles were written, photos of smiling families filled our promotional brochures. One evening, I walked into our new office, my office with my name on the door, and saw my son sitting on the couch, his legs swinging as he colored in a book. He looked up at me, grinned, and said, "Mommy, I like it here. Everyone is so nice to me." I sat beside him, pulling him close. He was right. The staff adored him. They always had a cookie or a kind word. He no longer asked me why his cousins had more. Instead, he told me about his new friends, about the places he wanted to visit next. For the first time, I realized something profound. I didn't need my parents' approval to feel whole. I didn't need my sister's validation to prove my worth. I had carved out a life where my son and I could stand tall without bowing to anyone's cruelty. But life has a strange way of turning tables. It happened on a gray afternoon. My phone buzzed with an unexpected call. My mother. Her voice trembled. "Your sister's business, it's gone. The partnership fell apart. The chairwoman, she cut ties with them. They've lost everything." For a moment, I said nothing. My mind spun. The same woman who had lifted me up had also pulled away from them. I could imagine the scene, my sister's panic, her husband's angry shouts, my parents' confusion. "They're struggling," my mother continued. "Your father is furious. We don't know what to do." Her voice cracked, and I could hear the sound of her tears. "We should never have treated you that way. I was wrong, my child. I was so wrong." Her words, the apology I had longed for my entire life, finally came. Yet instead of triumph, I felt a strange heaviness. Was this justice? Was this the revenge some part of me had craved? That night, as I tucked my son into bed, he whispered, "Mom, do you think Grandma is sad? Maybe we should help her too." His innocence cut through me. He hadn't forgotten the cruel words, but still he wanted kindness for them. I sat beside him, brushing his hair back. "You have such a big heart," I whispered. "Bigger than mine." The next morning, I met the chairwoman in her office. She was signing documents, her expression calm as ever. When I mentioned my family's situation, she raised an eyebrow. "They created their own downfall," she said. "I did nothing but step aside and let their true character reveal itself." I nodded slowly. She was right. Still, the thought of my parents, of my sister's child crying over lost comforts, made my heart ache. Later that week, my mother came to see me in person. Her eyes were swollen, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I treated you unfairly. I laughed when I should have protected you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll understand." I looked at her, this woman who had once been larger than life in my eyes, now small, fragile, broken. My son stood beside me, his hand in mine, watching silently. I took a deep breath, my heart steady. "Mom," I said softly, "I don't need an apology. I don't need a first-class seat. I don't need your approval. All I ever wanted was for my son to grow up knowing he is just as worthy as anyone else. I don't need revenge. I just need fairness." Her tears fell harder, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't speaking as the overlooked daughter. I was speaking as a mother, a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. That night, as my son and I looked out over the city lights from the balcony of our new apartment, he leaned against me. "Mommy," he said softly, "we're happy now, right?" I wrapped my arm around him, breathing in the cool night air. "Yes, baby, we're happy, and we'll keep being happy." But as I gazed into the glittering skyline, a quiet thought lingered at the back of my mind. Happiness had finally found us, yes. But was this truly the end of our story, or just the beginning of something far greater? Little did I know. The answer to that would change my entire family forever.